Hello, hello. Welcome to A Christian Male Perspective. My name is Andre, and I am joined today by a couple of fine gentlemen, Mr. John Thrower and Drew Smith. Guys, you want to introduce yourself, John?
Yeah, my name is John Thrower. I was born in Little Rock in '81, and recently did 23 years in the military. Just retired from the military, and now I'm working in the corporate field in Tyson in Northwest Arkansas. Look forward to spreading some experience and hope to educate everybody and bring everybody together and just make a positive impact is what the goal is today for me. So,
Cool beans, man. Glad to hear that. Yo, Drew, quick introduction for yourself.
No, of course, my name is Andrew Smith. I go by Drew. Uh, I'm a native of Mississippi, to be exact, because it's all where all my family's from, and also the Arkansas area, in Austin, Texas, in the suburb of Round Rock, where I'm currently a high school mechanics, which is my field. Something I've been very, very intricate in for like the last 20 plus. I'm glad to be a part of this. So hopefully, like John was saying, that us can spread some positive light and maybe share some inspiration about.
All right. So, guys, ladies, gentlemen, on this channel, we try to promote positivity and please, we love to hear you guys give a comment, ask a question, but be respectful to everyone in the comments. No cursing, no name calling, nothing that would just not be, not appropriate, guys. So keep that in mind on your comments, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. With that said, we're going to jump into today's topic, and we're going to be discussing building generational wealth God's way. And there's a lot of information out there about how to get rich, how to make money. But many times, just looking at those, they're doing it in such a way where it's not sustainable, where it's not able to be maintained. And that's something that us, as those of us men who are trying to follow God, who are doing everything in our power to follow life God's way, we want to build something. We want to build something that's sustainable. We want to build something that's going to last beyond us. That's going to be a legacy carry on beyond our generation. With that being said, there are a few topics that we are going to discuss about some challenges to building generational wealth, as some lessons learned in our life as we are three men who have done. God is blessed to do fairly well, and some things that we've learned along the way in the process. And yeah, with that, let's get started. So first topic of today is single family households. Me telling part of my story. I grew up, I was given away from my mom to my grandmother when I was 3 years old. My dad was not in my life at all. So I was raised by my great aunt, was my grandma, my great aunt and my great uncle. And he passed away when I was about 8 years old. So I had uncles that passed through, and I had older men that passed through that kind of acted as a father figure, but not really. And me and my grandma, my aunt, I keep saying my grandma, me and my great aunt, we struggled. There were times when it was hard. I can't tell a lie. I lived on a farm trying to, live that life. It was tough. There was some rough moments in there, but God blessed us to be able to make it. But there's still so many single families now out there who are trying to struggle and trying to make it. And I know one of the things I know the Bible, one of the focus verses that makes sense to me is in Ecclesiastes 4:9-10. It says this. It says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. And I know there's different reasons why you have single parent households, but it does get tougher. It's just when you have just one person, it's just that much tougher. So, guys, any thoughts on that? And because it's tough to build wealth when it's just one person doing it by themselves, whether it's a husband or whether it's a mom or a dad, you know?
Well, I think reality is that the day we live in right now, there are a lot of single parent homes. I grew up in a two parent home, and my father, you know, put that as far as providing in me early. So a lot of times I can't relate to um, a male that doesn't take care of his family, or how, these days and times where they don't take care of their children, or, they're not working. That's something that I don't really relate to. So what I will say is that we have to find a resolution as far as single parent homes, because all it does is that we're not breaking the generational cycle. So at one point we had two parent homes. Uh, in the 50s and 60s, it was irrelevant. It was part of the civil rights movement, the success of the civil rights movement for us to have the freedoms that we have today. Marriages were needed because they funded Martin Luther King, they funded Malcolm X, they funded all those black leaders that eventually lost their life for the greater good. Right now, that's not the case. Where we have single parent homes, we have wives that's out there, we have mothers that's out there, we have single ladies that's out there raising sons, and they don't know what a provider is. They haven't had that experience. All they see is their mother providing for them. So they take that on as a relationship and thinking that their wife should be the sole provider, because that's what they're used to. So it's important, for us to communicate, these standards and say this is how it's supposed to be done, because they don't have that ability to see that when they're growing up. So that's kind of what I'm
Anything?
on that. So
That's good. That's good. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I can definitely relate to being brought up in a home. So that's all I knew. So it's like that was my reality. I just thought that was the way of parents. Um, Even with some of my friends that I went to school with that didn't have both of their parents, I was still as I never experienced that. But we did have friends and people in the neighborhood why they would always love to come over to our house, man, when we were younger. And now as I'm older, I can look back and seeing the stability in the house. They enjoy being around, us, because to us, seeing that relationship and that dynamic of having both parents and then all of us together, and they love being a part of that. I just didn't understand it at the time. But I can say that my dad, he was a sole provider. Given he only had a ninth grade education, so it still got tough. But with seeing him there, him being there, it instilled a lot of values in me. I can tell you, man, to this day, nobody can outwork me. Nobody can, you know, and it's just because he instilled in me at a young age. So even when times get hard, it's like work and get myself, out of situation. With God's help and time. So my mom was she was a stay-home mom. She took care of the kids. But again, that's expected in a sense, in any other relationship. But as you said earlier, in Ecclesiastes, when we're doing it God's way, though, it is a different format. It can't just be our opinion or how we perceive things to be. We need to go back and see okay, it, and build from there.
So if you look at the statistics, I did a little research, and depending on which website you go to, the average income for a male in America is around 50,000, give or take. And the average income for a female, for a lady, is around 40,000. So there is a bit of a gap in there, and there's all types of reasons why that gap exists: job type, experience, hours worked. There's all types of reasons for that. But you can imagine if you were, let's take even the median of that. If you got one person making 45,000 trying to raise just one kid, I've only have two kids, and but you got someone making 45,000 raising one kid. You can imagine if there was another person there, if there were two people working together, you have a household of 90,000 on average. You could imagine if things could be a lot easier if that was the case.
Yeah, and you like I said, reality is that we don't have a case. Well, what do you do? I was sharing this with Andre. I read the scripture Timothy 5:8, and it talks about providing for your household. And I've been to church, I've been to many sermons, but I've never heard a preacher preach about what the man is supposed to do in the home.
Right, exactly.
So when you have mothers that are single that are coming to your church, what is our responsibility as the Black community, as the church, as those leaders, those servant leaders? How are we helping them? Because I'm 41 years old. If I haven't heard it in all that time span, I hear all about sowing the seed. We hear about all those things, but we never hear about what the Black man is supposed to do in the home. Timothy 5:8 says, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I don't think as males we've gotten that message, and I know it wasn't delivered preached, because there's some things that we can do as far as the community and our servant leaders to help bridge that gap. So if they don't have it at home and they go to church and they don't have it, where do they get it? They don't get it because our police officers give it to them. Things the law gives it to them, and that's why we have so many of our young men behind bars, because we're not taking that teaching in our own hands. I just thought that was very interesting to read a scripture like that was so powerful and then not be mentioned at all in any sermon.
Mhm. So getting back to that, so related to that, in the book of Ephesians, they talk about in Ephesians chapter 5, around verse 22 and 23, there's the popular verse about wives submit to your husbands. And I've heard that, you've heard that many times, wives submit to your husband. But if you read on further down in there, it says, husband, love your wife as Christ loved the church, giving of himself for him. And then if you go on further down, it says, basically, husbands, and I think it's around verse 20, 28, give or take, it's like husbands, basically provide for your wives as you provide for your own bodies. Because nobody ever hated his own body. So, John, I think there is a point to that where we are as men, we're called to provide. It's not easy all the time. And I think, Drew, you even pointed that out. It's not always easy. I've worked, several jobs at the same time. Worked server, I've given blood. I've done many, many different things in order to help my family get where I wanted to go, to help get the vision that we set forth, what we wanted to accomplish as our family. So, guys, we know it's not easy. You got three men here who've all worked multiple jobs at different points, who put in work. It's not easy, but it can be done. And sometimes what that means is that you're not spending more than what you have, which is eventually we're going to talk about budgeting, and that's a big part of that, is knowing how much you can live off of and as a family.
Right. And that scripture is universal as well. It also helps whenever you're going to marry a mother with children as well. The scripture still applies the same. You provide for her and her children. To be a part of that household. I mean, it's the same. So I know there's women out there that will welcome the help, and that can be difficult, but I believe that's really the main focus, the main point of that scripture is to say, hey, your job is to provide. If it's your house, you provide. And I think we miss that, and miss that responsibility, and things of that nature. And that comes with respect. Women respect you. The things that you struggle to get, it could come easy, based on, what you're doing at home. And the scripture lays it out for you. So I just think with a combination of things that we can do better as far as teaching our young men what providing is and what it's supposed to be at an early age, and also having some responsibility at that servant leadership level in the community, whether we're pastors, deacons, in the church, to actually help those young single mothers as well. So I think having more conversations about that in the church, and not always having one-sided conversations. You know, like
Hmm.
I said, we always talk about wives submit to your husband, but we never talk about what the husband is supposed to do for his wife. Um, and equality is preached in the world today. It should also be preached in the church.
Hmm.
So I think we just have to do a better job, as far as that.
So one of the things, so there's a couple other related to that before we move on. I do want to bring up this whole concept of 50-50, and I have a little funny story to tell about that one. But right now, just looking at some statistics, there's about, before the civil rights movement, I don't know what happened. I wasn't born back then, I can't tell you. But before, if the statistics hold true, before the civil rights movement, there was roughly about 25% of, from within the Black community particularly, about 25% born out of wedlock. That number now is, if you, depending on which statistic and Census Bureau you look at, you're looking at anywhere from 60 to 80% born out of wedlock. We have where the child is, where the mother and the father are not married and living together. Any ideas of what happened from the march on Washington to where we are in the march with George Floyd, that 60-year time period? Any thoughts on why it changed so radically?
I mean, I have several different thoughts regarding that, but the biggest thing, there was actually just an attack on the Black families, and I think that was the man. Living here in America, we have these freedoms to exercise these freedoms, but also we can separate or divide and conquer. Then it's easier to kind of push the agenda. Even in the Black households, that's what's really been targeted. Get the male out of the household, or allow the woman or the female.
I think we lost Drew there. He may have some connectivity issue there.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll finish up where he was leaving off. Back in the 60s, I believe there was a movement to, get the Black males out of there. Even with Martin Luther King, there were plots to weaken his family because they knew that the source of his strength was at home. So I believe that during that process, the shift started happening. And then you couple that with, we evolved, right? And things of that nature. And, the Black attack on, just the prison system with our males and things of that nature. And we started losing some of our older teachings. It's funny, we had a lot of teachings back in the 50s and 60s that would make families stronger and make them millionaires today. And they couldn't get it back then. It just wouldn't allow for them to prosper because of the Jim Crow laws and things of that nature. But you have to think about, what they went through, the determination they had, the courage they had, wanting to read and write, wanting to get their education, wanting to, be financially stable, having to save up money for college with nothing, making 5 cents, with these jobs. And some of that stuff they were able to do was amazing based on what they made. They would save up for years for their children. But when you fast forward today, what are we doing as far as the males? What kind of role models do we have today? Do we have those Martin Luther Kings? Do we have those speakers? Or do we have those men that are funding the Black community and helping give back? There's some of them, but are we doing that? And I would say that the church was so important to the civil rights movement that they were funding a lot of things. But where are they now? Seems like the church is weakened right now. That they don't really have a voice anymore. So the church used to be very powerful in the Black community. Now it's not. And I think the reason is because of flesh, because of sin, because of a temptation. And some of our leaders have succumbed to that. And that's driving away our young people, so they don't want to go to church. I say when we talk about, what happened in the shift, I think an important shift was when the COVID happened and people had to actually rely on the word, which is what was supposed to be actually happening, right? I said, because when Jesus died on the cross, the one thing that he did is he destroyed the temple because man was putting too much of his works and his worship in a building, not the people. So you think about that today. What did Jesus do? He said, okay, I'm gonna have COVID come here, and you guys are putting too much into the church. Now what happens when you can't go? What is your faith like now that you can't go into church? How is it tested? And then when people start realizing they didn't need a building to worship God, to worship the Lord, then it was harder for the church to get full again, unless they were doing the things that attracted people, like giving back, giving to the community, doing those things. Because, I'll be honest, that's what I look for in the church. It's no more than I'm impressed with your building. I'm looking at how you're handling, the community. I want to see what you're doing for the people around your church. I want to see how you're helping them. That's how I decide if I want to be your member. Not by what you have in your building. I don't care about the building fund. I don't care about your praise and worship team. Doesn't matter to me. I want to do what I can to do the good deeds that the Lord said that I need to do before I leave this earth. And are you going to give me a path to do that or not? Mm-hmm. Are we just for show, or are we actually doing the things we say we're going to do? So I think if you take a combination of that, here we are where we, the ladies don't have providers. I wouldn't get married either. They don't have providers. So it's like, well, why should I get married to him when I'm making the money? I mean, it ain't no benefit. So there's nothing there. So they don't see a strong man when they look at these guys, so we're not projecting. We're not teaching our young men. We're not, balancing things, because it's just hard. It's just hard right now to even pick a mate. Either you go all the way to the right where you're just looking at money and then you get the wrong thing on the inside, or you go all the way to the left. It's no in between anymore. So it's no in between. So if you take that, it's just hard right now. And like I said, what are we going to do about it? It's serving leaders. I mean, it's where we're at right now. So it's just pretty difficult, I think.
So I try to mentor. There's a group of guys that God has blessed me, group of young men that God has blessed me to talk to. Drew will be back on here in a few minutes. He's getting in, we get a better connection. But there's a group of young boys that I try to do my best to pour into, to that point of giving back. And one of the things I try to be mindful of is don't do things that will bring on responsibilities that you can't carry. And most of them being high schoolers or just out of high school, just out of college. Mm-hmm. It's like you're not in a financial situation where you should actively want to be taking on the responsibility, example, of being a husband, not a husband, but a father at this moment. You're not really in a financial position to do that. Now, some people go too far to the other side and they feel like they're never in good financial position to be, a father. And we don't want to do that. But if you can barely make your rent and you're not married and you can barely pay rent, or you can barely, keep gas in your car, or whatever the situation that you're dealing with at the moment, if you're barely, then you're not in a position you're not ready yet. So right. I encourage those guys, do things now to put yourself in a position to do that later. That means you may have to put off certain things until you're in a better position stably to do that. And likewise, I would even, I have a daughter, right? And the same thing goes for her. Don't do something that's going to put you in a position that you cannot actively support, right? I got a daughter 16, beautiful young lady, but she's still in high school. So, I mean, obviously, but even beyond that, I think honestly, and this is where it gets tough because it requires, I think it requires men and women both to change. And that's where it's the truth is what it is, right? If guys were more selective with how they go about doing that, obviously God, the Bible said abstain, and that's what you want for men and women. There's someone that said a saying, I can't remember who it was, but it said, if you marry before you carry, you put yourself in a better situation, right? If you marry before you carry a baby, you put yourself in a better situation. There's just too many statistics out there. And for those that don't like statistics, I'm sorry. The numbers kind of prove themselves out. When you have a family, a two-parent family, that child has a significantly better chance of not ending up in jail, of not living in poverty, of being able to go on and live a productive, successful life. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're from a single parent household, that can't be possible. I know it can. It's just that it's so much harder to do. It's so much harder to do. And again, I point back to the verse in Ecclesiastes. 2 is better than 1, right? Just looking, even going beyond just numbers. When my wife had our first son, there were times when she was tired. She did not want to get up with him in the middle of the night. It happens. 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to wake up. I was there to help take the load off of her. Likewise, when I had to be at work, I had to leave for work at 6 o'clock in the morning. My wife, knowing that, she tried her best to take care of the baby at night as well. So I can wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go work and provide for the family. So because there were 2 people there, it made things a little easier for us. Now, it doesn't mean it was perfect, by no means. But if I was trying to do that on my own, that would be, I can imagine, that would be so tough, just trying to do that. If she was trying to do that on her own, think about all the extra effort and work that goes into that. So I think if you just take the concept, if you marry before you carry, I think you will end up you have a better chance of ending up in a good, successful situation.
Right.
Okay. All right. Drew will be coming back on, but let's go ahead and move on to our second topic. Home ownership. So we talked about single family households, and there's a lot to that. Home ownership. There's historical things that happen. It's a fact. It's not a beat down or reproof on any one particular group. I don't believe in doing that, but I do agree. I do believe in acknowledging facts. It is what it is. So we know about the historical effects of redlining, and for those that don't know, redlining was a practice that was back pre-civil rights movement, and honestly probably kept going on for a while beyond that. But basically, where in America there were red lines drawn on a map where African Americans and Black people couldn't stay in certain parts of cities, and that had a detriment. Between that and some of the practices related in the banking and financial industries at that time, that definitely impacted the effect of home ownership. And it would be on like my grandmother, my great grandmother's age group. And yeah, so now we're at a point where in theory, those things do not happen. But it's going to take a few more generations for all of that to kind of work itself out, in my opinion. So quick thoughts on home ownership from you, man.
So home ownership. So I'll tell you, as far as my father's and mother's generation was terrible in finances. So that's just the truth. That's probably everybody's story.
Mm-hmm.
they just didn't talk about their finances because, they didn't know what to do. They were just working, trying to go check to check. They didn't know. I got most of my education from the military when I was young, went to the military at 17 years old, and I learned my information from somebody else. Home ownership is wealth. It's the beginning of your wealth. A lot of young people don't really realize that the home is something that doesn't lose its value; it only gains its value. And by living in a home, paying down the equity, you have cash. You have a potential cash flow there. Um, but our people just don't know enough about home ownership, really, and how valuable and how that can be your financial fountain, you know, per se. I'm in a situation right now where my house is my bank. I don't have to take loans out from a bank. My house is my bank, uh, because I understand the power of home ownership and what it can do for you. Um, so I will say that understanding credit when you're young, the financial literacy, what I've done with my children uh, is I actually put them on one of my credit cards, the oldest credit cards, uh,
Yep.
boost up their credit card score. Now, I don't give
Yep.
them access to my stuff. They don't get to spend anything. It's only for score. I cut up, I call, I put this code word, do not allow, and I tell them catch you doing anything. It's gonna be a problem. But we did both our kids like that and it raised both their credits early. So when they're 18, they're able to do certain things, they're able to get their credit. I've helped young people as well boost their credit, and I'm very proud of the way that they've been stewards of that. Having great credit is the start of home ownership. You can't own a home if you don't have good credit. If you're A lot of young people get into this where they just pay, they want to kick it, they want to have a good time. You can do that, but you got to have some responsibility financially, meaning you need to make sure that you can get a house loan. At least have a 620 credit card score. You go to Experian.com, check your stuff. You need to do that. Yeah, as a young person, Experian is your friend. You need to understand an auto credit card score, a credit card score, and a home. They're different. They're all three different scores. You need to understand that. And then you also need to understand getting a startup home and keeping that home. When you find somebody or if you meet somebody and y'all married, that can be a rental home and it can bring you some cash flow. But there's not a lot of education there. Surprisingly, it depends on the school district as well.
Hmm.
Because I was in Little Rock, my kids didn't learn anything. But then when I went to Northwest Arkansas, now my kids are getting my 10-year-old came to me. She was talking about points on a mortgage at 10 years old.
Wow.
This is what they're learning in Northwest Arkansas. I just want everybody to be aware. The school district is teaching these kids about loans. They they have a class where they have the budget at 10. So you take that. What are you going to do? What are we going to do? You're going to teach your kids how to do this. You're going to break this generational cycle. That's what I think about home ownership. It's really up to the people in the home. Take the lessons, learn, and research, and sit your kids down and teach them how to be successful. Teach them the consequences of bad money management and how that can affect you for the rest of your life. That can make your life hard. When you don't pay your bills on time, if you don't pay your rent on time, you can't get another apartment. I'm not signing for you. So, I mean, I'm just when your car get repoed and you don't pay your bills, you can't get another car. You got to go over there and see Tim's auto sales with 20% interest. So there's responsibilities to this. And, I think, like I said, it's on us to educate, but home ownership is basically, the start of that generational wealth, leaving a home that's paid off, is great, and putting that in a trust. And if you say, hey, you sell this home, y'all get it 4 ways. And if your home's, at least they have a head start on something,
So
So
that actually a couple of things. And I definitely want to get your thought on credit scores. I mean, you've been talking to me. You've educated me quite a bit on that. But to go along with this home ownership, I got permission to tell this story. I'm gonna tell it the best I know. But I have a friend. His name's Craig. Me and Craig went to school together in Fayetteville, and Craig grew up in Rose City, over in Little Rock, so not wealthy by any means in imagination. But Craig's grandfather invested and bought some farmland. It was a small farm, but his grandfather invested and bought some farmland. Craig's grandfather passed away and left it to his 3 kids, one of which was his mom. Time went on, and his mom got older, and she ended up moving in with him. And Craig ended up managing, taking care of the bills and all that, being a good son, right? Well, when she passed away, Craig was thinking at first, okay, maybe, I think Craig lives in Houston. His mom, the house was here in Little Rock. And basically, Craig, he could have sold it, made some money, like you said, and got a lump sum and did whatever he wanted to do with it. But instead, he said, you know what? Let me go talk to some friends I know that are in finance. And one of them happened to be, I think they were in Northwest Arkansas too. But anyways, he talked to a couple of his friends. It's like, okay, maybe let's try doing this rental thing. So he took his mom's house where she used to live in, and they had a small rental property still back on Rose City. And there wasn't much to it. But he took those and he started renting them out. And, he had some ups and downs. He made quite a few mistakes the first couple of times he did. We were trying to do that. He didn't know what he was doing. He was getting stuff, information from a friend, and, he was trying to make it work. Well, long story short, he stuck through it. He fought through it, and he got it up and running fairly well. Then he said, you know what? Let me try this thing again. So he went out and then on his own and got and bought a house and got with some friends he knew and talked to them about it. They bought some houses together. Now they're up to roughly around 10 to 11 houses. He just last Thanksgiving took me to the new one that he just bought here in Jacksonville. Doing really well for him and his family. Doing really, really well. Now with him and his collective, they're doing that. And part of it is that he didn't just settle for a short term. He decided to take a long-term look at it.
Right.
Now, here's the key thing about Craig. Craig is a bachelor, single. So he has no kids. So who would he leave this to, right? He's built this up. So what he did, he started bringing in his sister. And he started bringing in his niece and his nephew. Again, he doesn't have any kids. So he's letting his niece and nephew and his sister, they're right there with him, learning how to go about doing this business and how this business works.
Right.
So that when they get older, they'll be able to go off and do this now.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this started because a grandfather had a piece of property that was passed down that someone built on top of.
Right.
Makes sense? Let me get that, guys. Sorry about that. Keep on.
Yeah. I'm sorry I missed out, but I think I'm but I kind of know where the pieces are falling. And I like what you said about, man, because if you think about it, most Black families, that's one thing that we don't do. We have a mortgage, but as long as that mortgage is owned by the bank or by the lending, and that's one thing that I was really focused on, about 3 years ago, of debt, and making sure that everything that we had that we own, so I'm saying to my daughter. So that's definitely huge. Home ownership is the start, man. With having property, something that you can hand down and leave as a legacy.
Yeah. And the point is leaving it as a legacy. not as a debt for your children.
Yes.
Because that's what a lot of us get stuck with when, old school parents are not going to tell you about the finances.
No.
They'll still be like, Junior, you need to go back in there. You know your place. They won't tell me what's going on, but then when they pass away, here come these bills I didn't know about. So it's more important, like I said, ownership.
Right.
Not inconveniencing your children when you do leave this earth. You're not supposed to be hindrance after you pass away, to your children. They're already having to bury you. They shouldn't have to incur your debt. So their home ownership is important, to make sure that you leave something to your family and don't leave them the debt or inconvenience or, things of that nature. So we got to break that cycle.
Break it. And also to piggyback off what you're saying too, is the home ownership and just leaving it and that's it. Like it's all a collective, it's all about going for leaving generational wealth. And even like I said with the home thing, like you gotta have insurance, have to have insurance. Life insurance is vitally important because even if the parent did pass, at least you have the insurance that you can use to not only bury the family member, but also if you get the right type of coverage. And that's something that's not really taught. And I get it, because we're struggling just to try to get by anyway. So anything outside of just struggling, it becomes to where, no, that's just foolishness. We got to live, we got to survive. And I understand it. So when is the cycle broken? And I thank God for my dad, because I could tell he was thinking past his time. He really was, man. That he had, I know they came down to me, and I'm just carrying those ideas out, and still complain about, oh well, he left, he didn't leave us, with no policy. I can complain about that. I think the good that he did leave us, because honestly, when he came up with the concept, man, I still to this day, I don't know where he got the idea from. But when as a young black man, when I first started working in my career as an automotive technician, but again, I didn't have anybody to really show me how to manage that money. And so, but when he did, man, I started hearing it from other people, and then I started taking those classes. My mom, I'll never forget that book that she gave us, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read that book. I didn't understand it, but as I was started being around other people who were more intelligent and more wise about this, I started gleaning along the way. And that's another thing. Like, we got to get outside of our circle as far as, oh, that's my family, that's my friend. Yeah, but if they don't know nothing, if they can't give you any knowledge on how to better yourself financially, you got to get away from them, man. And so together. So like you said, even if we had the insurance policy put in place, if the house wasn't paid for, it'll cover everything. So you still don't have all the debt, Yeah. So
and you know what? Another thing that you mentioned, we talk about generational wealth, but it's some things that my parents give me that will help me get generational wealth that didn't cost a thing.
Yeah.
My grandmother, like I said, she told me to be above average. You have to be above average. You have to do this. You can't look at what somebody else is doing. You got to be above average. You got to have a certain standard about yourself, because you can't look over there and look at somebody else's, because that's not your standard. That stuck with me, and that gives me the edge on a lot of people because of the way I think.
Exactly.
I think to be above average. And people are like, man, you're always putting forth that effort. It's like, yeah, I got to be above average. I just can't do average. That
Right.
works for you, but not for me.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of generational knowledge that's passed down, like the work ethic that we get.
Mhm.
That's free. I got the work ethic from my father. I can work all day long.
Right.
That's free. But that turns into generational wealth, that work, that work ethic. So it's not, they didn't give me the generational wealth, but they gave me things, the tools to prepare myself to it. So it's a balance, I think, as far as what you're saying, the life insurance. And, I'll tell you a story. I come up here to Northwest Arkansas. I mean, a lot of job opportunities here. It's not a lot of African Americans here, not a lot of diversity here. But if I didn't break away from my comfort zone, I wouldn't have prepared myself to the next level financially if I didn't do that. I came here, I was able to build my own home, source it, and I got that information from somebody here. So I was able to build a home. I'm doing what everybody else is doing. And I was able to build my home, and as an investment, I have a big home. It's over 7,000 square foot, but it's an investment. And I built it for a third of the price of what it's worth. So this home made me a millionaire just because I built it, just because I moved and I took that chance. And that's a lot of problems that we have with our community. If it's not comfortable, they won't push. If their look, oh, it's not a look, it's not a diverse enough for me.
Yeah.
But Little Rock didn't start off being diverse. It was certain parts back in the 50s, 60s that Black people were only allowed to be. So everywhere didn't start with just diversity. Little Rock was not diverse in certain parts. Now it is. So the trend has to start somewhere. So like you're saying, with the generational knowledge, the wealth, the life insurance, that's something that needs to be ingrained in our young people, from an early age. Because I have whole life insurance, but who told me to get that? I got it at 17. I didn't know what I was doing. It was $23, and it was like $500 something dollars. I was paying $23. I was in shape. I was 17.
Wow.
The younger you are, the cheaper it is.
Yes.
So
Yes.
by me, I didn't know what they were doing. They're like, you need to get it. And I was like, well, okay, $23. So now I got more life insurance than I know what to do with it. I told my wife I'm probably not gonna die because you're gonna be rich. So I might have to wake up on you. I might just suffer through it. That's it.
Right.
I've got so many life insurance policies just from me getting them when I was like 20, and they were nothing. I mean, $40 a month for 400. Yeah, I pay that. Oh, give me this one too, $275. I take this one. Hey, give me about 500,000. I'm just getting life insurance because I'm young. It ain't costing much. I said, well, I set 150 toward life insurance, and I'll just start getting them to total up to that. But the thing about it is, I got them young. They don't change.
Exactly. No.
So a couple of things I want to talk to before we get on. Drew, I definitely want you to give your thoughts and inputs on credit score and some of the things that you've learned about managing a credit score.
Right. I think that I learned about credit score, man, is like it matters. It matters. Funny story to tell. When I first got married, of course, like I said, just making money, and I'm thinking, true, we, furnish the apartment, whatever the case may be, get the apartment. I couldn't even get the apartment, first off. So I got California, moving to this little town in Mississippi, and I couldn't even get the apartment because I didn't have a good credit score. Money, I just go and pay the deposit, whatever, but they check my credit. I couldn't call my bride, and it was a humbling experience. Let her know, hey, we don't have no plan. She had to end up getting an apartment, everything in her name, which, again, it was a humbling experience on credit. And at the time, 21 years old, 22 years old. And so now my credit score was 415. It was 415. Because I didn't have any. It have, man, I ain't think nothing about it. Like, I don't need it. I just make money. And so I never forget when we're looking for furniture. I'm like, man, a bed? Sure, I can buy a bed. You know what? Maybe $500-600. Man, we started looking at beds. The mattress alone, I had no clue. The mattress alone was like $1,500. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, but that's not including like the frame, the chest and all that kind of stuff. So it's almost like the one we were looking at. It's about $2,500. I'm like, wow. That's a nice little chunk. Put it on your credit. That way you don't have to worry about paying for a cash. So I was like, all right, I couldn't afford the bed, the dresser and all that stuff. And so it was a humbling experience. And so, but nobody, I'm serious, in our family, as I ever sat down and taught us credit, taught us what credit really means, and downplay it. I just understand that they didn't understand it. So when you don't, you teaching and pass along. A lot of stuff we're taught was church, moral things. So my journey on my, fixing my credit score was, first of all, understand what it means, and then, understand how to start adding value to it. I started looking into understanding how the credit score is broken down, about the late payments we have, about the mixture of the credit, because I didn't understand none of this stuff. And what a good credit score looks like, we found out a lot of good information. Even the banks will give you their own credit score, how much money that you have invested with them, or whether it's in your savings account, money market account. Those things mean something. It's not just accounts that you open up. But early on, what I did, honestly, this just happened about, I'm going to say this happened probably about maybe 7 years ago. We were trying to get our house, and we're on this program, and we're trying to get the credit. And I had a lot of things that are on my debt that I had to get off. A lot of I had and it wasn't just bad, but it was bad enough. So I had to do the work, man. I had to do the work. I had to do the work as far as clearing up my credit. And long things do stay on your credit. And so I just developed a game plan. And okay, let's start. I didn't have any bankruptcies or anything like that. But my closed accounts, they were killing me, because they went into most collections, they will stay on your account for a number of years unless you dispute them. Well, then I got into how to dispute, different infractions stuff that was on my credit. The biggest thing was because is that when you move, your address is changed, then the creditors, they have to update. They don't update your information, then the information that they have on file is not valid, and you can actually do a dispute against it. Easy way to do it. And so that's why I started doing it. I was like, hey, I'm not Andrew Smith that lives in Corinth, Mississippi. And if you send in a dispute letter, just with your updated address on there, if they don't go in by law, by the credit act law, they have to take it off. They have to take it off. And so that's how I got a lot of stuff taken off. And then I started, filing disputes about disruptions that's on my credit, because of stuff that was reported that was no longer for the original creditor, but they put it into collections, and they can't do that. By law, they can't do that. Like, they have to get your information from you. It's illegal according to the Fair Credit Act. And so I just started using that, and so it did take time. I mean, it's not like it's going to happen overnight. It took time, because you got and you have to stay on top of it. Now, at first, I was starting off submitting the letters, but then I actually got them to start sending the letters, but I paid them monthly, but they would send this again until YouTube started coming along and everybody started jumping on, talking about how you can dispute your own credit and start doing it on my own without paying anybody. But the thing about it is if you have just about having good credit, it's about giving you leverage, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, leverage is it's not about you just going out and buying stuff, but it's the ability to have that buying power. It's up to you, and hopefully, we can become educated enough to where we can make those smarter decisions, like going to get a new car. Man, cars are nice, but they depreciate in value. If you go get a car today, $60,000 for the car you drive off the lot, it's probably worth maybe $50,000. It depreciates in value that fast. Due to that vehicle that'll make it a valuable asset. Not unless you're using it for something, that's not like that. But we, that's what we do. We sink our money into a lot of things that are not that are liable assets. So what my goal was, like, when to build your credit, and once you get it in, use as leverage so that you can start investing in these assets to where you can actually.
So, guys, just to put the disclaimer out, because I don't want YouTube and Facebook to come get mad at us. We're giving advice from our personal experience. So these are things that we've had to go through. None of us are legal experts or financial experts or medical experts. So don't take it as a gospel truth that it will guarantee to work exactly in the same way. But these are from our experiences. So we're telling you what we've had to go through. So YouTube or Facebook, hope we did the right thing for you. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump on. And we're going to come back to some of these topics later on. But you jumped into the third topic talking about life insurance. And I looked it up because I was curious, because a lot of times, I hate to see it, GoFundMe's and things like that, where people are, if someone passes away and you have to do a collection at the church and whatever the case may be. According to the statistics, we Black people have as much life insurance and actually more life insurance as per actual life insurance than just about anyone else. So there really isn't a gap there. The problem is that we typically have the bare minimum, just enough to cover a burial. And I'm talking about a simple burial at that. I actually had a conversation with a couple of young men. I had it with some more men in my family last weekend talking about life insurance and the different aspects of that. I found that there are 4 purposes for life insurance. 1, you got to cover your burial costs. That's what we think of, right?
Right.
You got to cover your burial costs. But 2, I think life insurance is a way to provide for your family when you're not there. John, you brought up 1 Timothy 5 and 8. It says, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. As husbands, we're called to provide. But if we're not here on this earth, how can we still provide for those that are left behind? So I think life insurance is a way to provide once you're gone. Third, part of that providing is to make sure you're not leaving any debt. There's no point to leave a $200,000 life insurance policy and you got $500,000 worth of debt.
Exactly.
The math doesn't work, right?
No.
So you need to pay off all your debt and still leave some to provide, in my opinion, for your family.
Right.
And 4th is you're not on this earth no more. So try to leave something for God's work and his kingdom to continue, right? So if you can pay off all your debt, pay your burial expenses, pay 5 to 10 years worth of living expenses for your spouse that you're left behind, and still leave some for the kingdom, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape. Thoughts on that, guys?
I think you're spot on with that as far as that. One thing I would put out there, like I said, the younger you are, that's the time that you want to get your life insurance when it's not going to be such a financial
burden.
Burden. I'm not paying a lot, and I got a lot of life insurance. But if I would have got my insurance today, you're talking about like $600, $700, maybe $1,000 for. That's a big difference from $150 to $1,000. So if you think about that, that's kind of what's happening right now. With that being said, understand, making sure that you do those things, and there's different scenarios too. I know young athletes don't know this. They actually need to get their insurance younger, before they're even. If you're going to go to the NFL and play football and things of that nature, you don't get life insurance like that. So you might want to take it out early if you're going to be an NFL star, because no insurance company is going to fully pay you for insurance when you get hit on the field and suffering concussions. It just don't happen. But that's something they don't tell you when you're an athlete. You don't get that luxury. So it's a lot of things when you're young you need to capitalize on, but we don't get those conversations.
Hmm.
So I think that you're spot on when you say life insurance, but do it at an early age. If you've got any young, even if we have people that have young children, young kids, they need to be talking to them when they're 20, 21, and
Hmm.
sure that they're taken care of. $15 for a young person to get them a decent amount to cover themselves.
So there's different types of insurance, and this is something I, I we'll talk about. I went through Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University, and actually, my son is going through that now. He's 22. He just got his first big boy job, if you will, but he's going through that and learning through that now. There's two types of life insurance. Primarily, they are categorized. There's term and there's whole.
Yeah.
And Drew, I know you're very experienced with this, so you could probably definitely give a better explanation. You kind of want to give a summary. Again, we're not insurance experts, so don't, But would you mind giving a summary of the two types of insurance and the differences between them?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, and John, I think John is on the does know it, maybe he doesn't know it. Because when he said he got that whole life insurance policy early and flipping out, because he's got a whole life policy means that it's probably his value, and that's the two different things about having term life and permanent insurance. Term getting 15 year, 20 year, 30 year. Think about it. It is once you end that term, then you got to go get to get another policy. With whole life, it doesn't end. It goes you die, which is a lot more expensive in a sense. That's what I'm paying now. But I understand the piece, and I understand there's leaving wealth to my daughters, to my family when I'm gone. A lot of people don't really talk about too much because you think about death. Life insurance, because it can only be used in the event that the person who has it dies. So it's a benefit for the family. But what I like about the whole life is that the whole life you can actually benefits. Plus, it's huge for tax advantages, man. One thing about the whole life, it is invested, what I'm saying, and quite a bit of the market, but it never value. So just like the market, when COVID hit, man, there's people that lost, the market suffered. With the whole life policy, it can make it, you're not going to make as much as far as like the interest off of it over the long period of time, but it never dropped down. More consistent, and overall, at the end, you will make more. So just say if you lock into where you got a policy 0.5%, if the market drops to 5%, you're still good at 13.5%. So below, what the market is. And so that's giving you to where the amount of benefits you have in there, they're not going to dump, they're going to stay consistent. And then when the market comes to rise, what I did with my policy is I took I started finding out about this stuff. Of course, I went and got my Texas insurance license and understand it. I don't want to just do it just to be saying, oh, I heard. No, I went and got my license. I took the exam. I had to take it to exam to get it. I didn't want to sell insurance. I just want to know more about it. And so daughters, and I'm telling you, the benefit of it, man, for me and my family, and it's one of those things. My insurance agent, hey, what my policy at? Like, what's going on with it? And what is it looking like? Am I on something that I'm invested in? So when my daughters turned 18 years old, each one of them automatically got, right off the bat because of how I built their policy. And when they turn 18, year own policy, and I think they have roughly about $150,000 for their own life insurance part for them. And so, yeah, I'm paying it now as an investment, but all they have to do is take it and take it for maximum benefits because they'll start younger. And like John was saying, if you start younger, man, the amount of money that accumulate, because now we're dealing with compound interest, man, the amount of money that accumulate by the time they're late 20s and their early 30s, they won't have to want for nothing. And so my daughter right now, my Lord knows I'm trying my best, but when she turns, 25 years old, she don't have to eat a man. I'm not gonna say, hey, I don't want. I'm gonna teach her, how to, what I'm saying, stuff. But to have somebody that she just has to depend on, I didn't want her to be that way. Be straight, and that's what that universal policy, that whole life. It's called IUL, insurance policy, and it depends on how you build it to what you're trying to grow.
So again, so the two main key takeaways from this, guys, is there's term life and then there's whole life. Get it while you're young. Get it while you're healthy. Yeah, I just went and got another policy on Friday. And because I'm older, I'm 47, I think I'm probably the oldest one. And because I'm a little heavier, I'm a little thicker, if you will, they looked at it and said, oh, okay, so we're going to charge you a little more because you're a little older and you're a little thicker, if you will. So get it while you're young. I just had a meeting today. I think I got a nephew who's like 24 maybe-ish. My son is 22. I sat down and I went over this very specific scenario with them. And typically what I recommend is get a term life policy, especially while you're long. You get a 40-year term, get a term life policy to cover your debt. So remember we talked about all the different things that insurance is for? Your term life policy covers your burial expenses and it pays off any potential debts that you have. And by debts, guys, we're talking about your house, credit cards, student loans, cars, anything that if someone could call my wife and say, we owe, that's what my term life policy goes. I have a term life policy that covers all of that. So if God forbid if something happened to me before I turned 62, my wife, everything is paid for. Yeah. In addition to that, I have additional money to cover living expenses for her for a few years so that she could get herself on her feet and figure out what's going on, get over me. I know I'm allowed to lose, but get over me. And then so she don't have to just worry about trying to go to work the next day. Right. So we have to cover that. And then there's enough, perfectly enough in there to where she should be able to continue to give and benefit God's kingdom. So to John's point, I didn't learn about this. I went through Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University when I was 42, about 5 years ago. I learned about a lot of this. Now, Dave doesn't advertise whole life. He advocates term. And that's why I bought my term life policy. I'm not here to debate, to fight on whether or not Dave Ramsey is right or wrong. There's some good things I learned from him. And there's definitely some things I would definitely promote from what he says. But I bought additional insurance because I want to make sure my family's covered. I want to make sure that my wife should want for nothing. My daughter, if she's still around and still living with my mom, should want for nothing. So that's kind of why I try to cover all of those bases with that. So what I would recommend, guys, is those that are listening. Again, we're not insurance experts, so even though Andrew is a license in Texas for insurance, but not insurance expert. Go and research insurance company, your local insurance companies. Go and research and sit down and have a meeting. You're never too young to have a meeting with an insurance person. That's why I'm talking to my son. He's talking about getting married. That's going to be one of the very first things I'm end up doing with him. So, people, do your research. But there's information out there. Do your research, guys, and take the time and effort to do it while you're young. It'll be much cheaper on you if you do it. You're going to save yourself than if you wait till you get more money. Do it while you're young. Build it into your budget now. Again, I think doing something on budgeting is going to be something down the road. But yeah, do it on that. All right, guys. So we've talked about the three main things for financial building generational wealth. 1, 2-parent households. I know it doesn't always work out, but definitely focus on that. Got another comment. 2, build and focus on home ownership, right? Take the effort, and there's programs out there. There's a program called NACA, which is good for first homeowners, and take the time to do that. Try to work on your credit score, right? There's things that we can do now to build and to work ourselves into home ownership. It's going to take work, but we can do that. 3, life insurance. Invest in it while you're young. Invest in it while you're young. And when you think about life insurance, yes, burial cost is important, but think about paying off debts, any debts you have, paying, providing for your family, and also benefiting the kingdom of God. You buy it, as John said, you buy it early. You can buy it a lot early, and you can bless the kingdom of God if God take you home soon.
Right.
All right. We got one comment here from Victoria. I just heard someone the other day talk about working with a fraudulent insurance agent. So they had to deal with that after their mom died. So yes, do your research, guys. Take your time, do your research. But getting life insurance is paramount, especially if you're a husband and a father. It is paramount that you guys, it's important. Take the time. It's a responsibility and a duty, especially as a husband. And even wives too. Wives have insurance, because if you, God forbid, if something happened to a wife, the husband, you don't want him to have to go back the first day and have to deal with work and all that stuff. You want to give him time to work through the process. So it's important. All right. Guys, thank you. Anything, final thoughts? John, Drew?
No, I think this has been a great conversation. I hope people are listening and took some of these points and will act on it. So,
All right, Drew?
My thoughts about the the accumulation of getting things, but moreover about getting yourself. And I feel like what we've been talking about is really to position yourself to where you can take it, and that's all about getting the knowledge and getting the resources that you need.
So I'll leave you guys with this verse. This is Proverbs 13:22 for the New King James Version. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. So, guys, we want to follow this classic mindset of what God has for us to do. Then we have a responsibility to lay the foundation today for our families, even when we're gone. Let's lay the foundation. We may not benefit from all of that ourselves, but if we do the work and lay the foundation, then our children, our children's children will be able to reap the rewards. And if they build wisely, man, there's no telling what God can do through us. All right. Thank you guys for listening. This is Andre with John and Drew from Christian Male Perspective. Catch you guys later. Stay sharp, fellas.
all right. Bye.